Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea Tranquility. I'm your host, Pete Pardo, in the co-captain's chair today. First time in 2021, as we just found out, Mr. Steven Reid, all the way from Scotland. What's going on, my friend? How are you? Happy New Year.
I am excellent. Happy New Year to everybody, because it's the first time this year, as we were just discussing. And certainly from my point of view, I'm excited to kick the year off with something that I have no doubt will be near at the top of my list for the end of the year. Bold prediction this early in February, but I've absolutely no doubt that for me, it's going to be a player. Something going to have special is going to have to come along to make it not the player, but we'll see. There's time for that, and I'm always willing to have something knock it off number one.
Well, I mean, and I think we do that every year here on the channel or on the website. It's like, there's always a couple of really good releases that kind of kick off the year and knock our socks off. And we can only, we always say, oh yeah, at the end of the year, that's going to be riding high at the top of my list. But I mean, you don't know what's going to happen for the next 10 months or so, right? And yeah. I have seen, in fact, you and I talked about it, where, Magnum's a perfect example of a band that always puts out their new album in January or February of every year. And you're like, oh, this is great. This is going to be one of my favorites. And by the time August, September rolls around, we've completely forgotten that Magnum even released the new album. But the album in question today is The Future Bites by Steven Wilson, which I'm sure, there we go. Okay. So I think it's safe to assume and safe to say that this new album from Mr. Wilson is pretty controversial among the fan base. And, I've been listening to this guy for a long time throughout all sorts of different things that he's done. And I will say, just when you think you kind of know that he's settled into a direction, he changes pace. And he basically says, yeah, what I just did, I'm done with that. This is the new thing. And he's done that a few times. He did it numerous times within Porcupine Tree, and then he's decided he had enough of that. We've heard him say numerous times during Porcupine Tree, we're not prog rock. I don't really like prog rock. And then what does he do? He goes and releases his first couple of solo albums, which are total prog rock. He remixes these classic prog rock albums and hobnobs with the guys from Yes and King Crimson and Jethro Tull and Gentle Giant, so on and so forth. And now, he remixed this thing, which I just got in today, right? And, so he is a guy who I don't think likes to stay in one place for too long. And the brand new album, like I said, is called The Future Bites. It's on Caroline International, produced by him and David Costin. Steven's going to handle the bulk of this review because he's pretty familiar with it. I've heard it a couple times. I'm going to give my kind of opinions on it at the end, but I want Steven to, because Steven has really digested this and I think knows it pretty well. And he's the guy here who can really speak to it. So I'll let you kick us off there.
Well, yes, I definitely have got to know it quite well. Anyone that's read my rather lengthy review on Sea of Tranquility will know that I do have the vinyl. This is the 2 edition vinyl, which I got because you get this with it. So this is exclusive to that. And I can't help myself, let's be honest. So it is also very cool. I also then, I must admit, I have also got the limited edition box, which is utterly fantastic. Very black and white. I have to say, very difficult to get things out of the box. I won't do a full unboxing because there are a million of these already, but it does have the whole phenomenal massive booklet that comes with it. 4 discs of content with it. Wow. Instrumental version of the album. There's a bonus disc with some remixes and also with some totally bespoke music, which is arguably as good, if not better, of some of the stuff that's on the album. There's also, and I won't unfurl it all, but there's 2 posters. You get a warranty. Okay, so you get a warranty, which is in the nicest possible way and thoroughly intended ridiculous, because when you read it, it's meant to make you smile. I think it's meant to make you smile, and it made me smile. I actually read it out to my family, who just looked as if to say, what is he doing now? It's in numerous languages, so it is meant to look like the part of the product.
Not to interrupt you or to deviate from this conversation, this just dawned on me. I don't know why I haven't thought of this before. I have got to get you and Chris Allo on a show together, because you guys are like, out of anybody that I know, the two guys who understand the art of being a collector when it comes to an artist that you love. Because I feel like I'm having like the same conversation I have with him all the time in regards to movies and Black Sabbath releases and Slayer releases and Judas Priest releases, where you have to buy the ultimate box set, the deluxe edition, even if you already have 5 copies of the album. You got to keep, I mean, it's incredible that there are people like this out there like us. And it's like, we're not, it's like, we may not be the norm, but we are really unique people, really, when you think about it. So anyway,
well,
we will make that happen one of these days. Cause I think you guys in a conversation would be hilarious, I think.
Yeah, I would love it. That would be great, I have to say. Yeah, the whole thing is part of the experience for me. And I will probably put my hands up and admit, I mean, you can tell from the poster behind me here, I do like a gimmick. I like a band that sells you the whole thing. Kiss have lost their way on that, but let's not get into that. It's a different conversation entirely. But the whole package, it's here with a mirror that has a limited edition of 1, which is you. When you look at it, I've got a questionnaire about my satisfaction with the Future Bites that's taken the mick out of the old books that used to come with the CDs. I also then bought a little bit of advertising for them. I bought Electronic Sound magazine, which I've obviously then themed in how they look. And I bought it through Burning Shed, who have also got in with the look of it, because I also, with the magazine, got another exclusive single which has other mixes on it from things from the album, which is also
endless.
Very cool.
It's just endless.
Yeah, it really is.
So in other words, you need a whole closet for this release alone, right?
Yeah. I mean, this one's taken it to a new level. The Steven Wilson collection is all deluxe editions. Most of it's replicated on vinyl, not all of it, but most of it is. This one's taken me to a new level, to the extent that the actual CD for the album isn't in the box because it takes that long to get out the box that you can't listen to it. So yeah, this has been a little silly. I will admit that I've been a little silly here, but I like being silly, so. And thankfully, I quite like the album too.
Well, I would hope so after all this, right? Could you imagine you sifting through all that stuff? You're like, oh, this sucks, right? What? You just spent 2 hours taking everything out and then taking inventory, and then you're like, oh, what is this garbage? Anyway, but I know you do like the album a lot.
Absolutely. So, and it's gone beyond that as well. I think one thing that the digital age lacks is the kind of excitement that you used to get in the build-up to a release. There used to be an awful lot of kind of, pre-release promotion that would go on. You'd see your favourite bands on the TV, you would see adverts in the magazines, posters would go up in the record stores, and you just had that feeling, and it made you want it on day of release. And Steven Wilson has tapped into this, I think, really well in past releases, but with this one, it's just been fantastic. The build-up of videos. I decided not to bring through the singles to show you as well, because I've also bought the 12-inch singles that have gone along with the release and the CD singles. I haven't even added up what that comes to, but let's not. And it just has built from there. He's had adverts in Times Square. He's had billboards in London. It's for certainly music that I'm passionate about. I haven't seen something like this for decades, if at all. And then, of course, there's a limited edition box set of 1 that went for £10,000, which the chap who won it, in inverted commas, all that money went to musical charities, I may add, for anyone that is questioning what that was about. But the chap who won it has been kind enough to do an unboxing, show you all the things, Grammy medals or Grammy nomination medals and his certificate, the bag that he used in the video to promote the whole idea, which is obviously bespoke. But there's 1 live track and 1 studio track that are available nowhere else and wouldn't have been available anywhere else, other than the guy who won it was kind enough to put them on YouTube and has made a video that actually fits in with the videos. He's done a fantastic job of it, and I must admit that I've enjoyed his altruism, I have to say, because it would have been easy to say that's mine. I think I might have done that at least for a little longer than he did. To save up those bits of music that only I could hear. But the whole thing's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it. But there's also some music on it too.
I would hope so.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me, because I know that Steven Wilson has gained a lot of people along the way. he's also lost a lot of people along the way because, as you say, I mean, Porcupine Tree started off as a kind of druggy, sort of spacey, sort of out there band or project. It wasn't really a band at the start. No Man was his band at the start. That then evolved into a quite phenomenal progressive rock outfit that looked set to really reign over the genre to some extent. They were kind of on that cusp of they are going to be the big thing. And as someone who's as obviously belligerent as Steven Wilson is, he decided, well, let's not do that then. Let's do something completely different. Broke my heart because I thought, well, why would you stop being in a band that's as good as that? I saw them live a few times, utterly outstanding.
Yeah.
And then his first solo album for me, without getting too deep into that, was a little bit of a letdown. And I kind of thought, oh, well, where do we go? But from there, he's evolved through numerous different styles. The Raven that refused to sing, I think most people would hold up as probably one of the best, most recent kind of prog albums. It is a prog album. And he was lauded for that. And then from there, we've gone somewhere else entirely. But I do think that there are elements of all of that journey and his probably own musical influences on this album. It just happens to be coated in a pop veneer that I love his production, I have to say, in the same way that I enjoy the kind of, I wait to say latter day Rush, but that's not really true now, that kind of era where the guitars got lost a little, and I love guitars. I loved the almost sterile production of those albums. And I see a similarity with what Steven Wilson does, but it is maybe even a little bit more clinical, I would say. And I can understand why people who are looking for that Raven kind of feel now look at this and go, but this is not nothing like that at all. However, as you go through the album, I mean, there are tracks such as, to me anyway, because a lot of people are not hearing these things, and it has to be said, but in songs such as Eminent Sleaze, Man of the People, there are massive female backing vocals, there's slap bass in there, some of the kind of atmospheres and the echoing sort of sounds that certainly through the headphones, it's a phenomenal headphones album. Take me right back to Dark Side of the Moon. But he doesn't carry that through everything. And I think that's maybe why it kind of loses the prog feel, if that makes sense. But I hear a bit of Sparks in certain things. I hear kind of Phil Collins, either Genesis in certain things. But to me, I really love the way he structures his songs, their journeys. But he's also manages to put choruses in there. Follower has a chorus that just sticks in my mind, and I find myself singing it at the most inopportune moments, as you do. But I think also there's grooves in there as well, and he's incorporating lots of different styles. But certainly to me, it's a very cohesive album. But I can see why people don't feel that. Do you know, it's an interesting journey.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I talked to him and interviewed him back in very, very early 2000s. He played at Nearfest, and I met him and talked to him at Nearfest. And I almost got the impression back then that this is the kind of direction that he eventually wanted to go into anyway. Because, you know, there were little bits of this throughout a lot of his albums, just not a lot of it. And you know, I think I don't think he was ever a huge prog rock fan. I think it's something that he dabbled in and did it quite well, as many people will say. But I always think that he had this kind of electro Brit pop, a little bit of psych, kind of, there's elements of techno in here. I mean, there's a little bit of everything. In essence, it's a very upbeat, groove laden British pop record with a lot of electronic influences. And I honestly think that by him, because, you know, a couple of his more recent solo albums are beloved by the prog community. I think he went back into that style just enough to have everybody think, yes, Steven Wilson is once again our savior. I love this guy. And then this album comes out and it's such a 180 that a lot of people were really jarred by it. Now, in saying all that, I think in a perfect world, there are tracks on this album that should be and would be played in clubs and doing quite successful at that. I mean, I was listening to Personal Shopper a little while ago. That's a great song. that is, I mean, that is grooves to die for. The hooks are there, the vocals. I mean, there are a couple, Self is a quirky, fun song. Eminent Sleaze has its moments. I find for me, a lot of this album doesn't appeal to me because it's not really my cup of tea. But I think there are a few things here that I kind of like that make me think if I were to take this album and listen to it nonstop for a couple of weeks, I bet you I would change my tune a little bit more. So, right, like for me right now, I'm on the fence about this album because there's not a lot that really grabs me, but I do like a few things that are really interesting to me. And I'm like I said, Personal Shopper for me is the first album that really spoke to me and said, all right, there's some good stuff happening here that I think, given some time, will really win me over. And, is the lack of guitar troubling for me? Yeah, it is. I have a hard time, Steven Wilson, no guitar. I mean, is there any guitar on this album at all? Very little, right? If there's any.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is guitar there, but there are songs, to be fair, like King Ghost, where he appears to have really attempted to negate them entirely, as to be said. So that is a little bit of a leap. I don't. It's funny how I alluded to Rush earlier on. They sound nothing. This sounds nothing like Rush, to be fair. But that's maybe I see a similar kind of journey in that sense, where they went through a phase where I would imagine that Alex Lifeson kind of thought, "Do I need to bother going into the studio today?" And I suppose because Steven Wilson is doing it all, that conversation never takes place. So whatever his muse is at that stage, but to me, the journey has been, I would say, quite logical to get to where we are, because you do have Grace for Drowning. That's an excellent prog album. You do have The Raven That Refused to Sing, arguably his best prog album, solo anyway. Let's not get too deep into Porcupine Tree, because there's a lot in there that would rival that. But then when you move into things like Hand Cannot Erase and To the Bone, it does become much more about the chorus. It does become much more about, and the production's always been fantastic. To me, it's a real strength of his, but it's much more about the production. And I do see kind of similarities with that almost high-tech pop, maybe not even just British pop, but I would even say European pop, things like Sparks and various things like that, where you could be mega successful and have hits with the quirkiest of songs that still had a lot of depth to them.
Yeah.
And that's what I find probably the last 3 albums, including The Future Bites, but maybe it's just gone a step beyond there with this one. But when you look at, I mean, the guy is determined not to be pigeonholed. I mean, you look at Bass Communion. Now, that's a step too far for me. If it says Steven Wilson on it, I will buy it. I don't have any Bass Communion. I did. I must admit that I've actually parted with them because, well, I ain't ever going to listen to it. So what's the point in having it, do you know? I think it's IEM is another one of them where I can live with that. But that to me is background music. That's something to put on when I don't want to really listen to that. I want to do this. But then you've got No Man. He was obviously heavily involved with Blackfield. And there, I would say there's dance elements in there, there's pop elements in there. And to me, it's almost like he's funneled everything that's kind of come is now funneling into this one thing under the name Steven Wilson. And much so all of these strands continue on, this is obviously his baby now. So why would you not gather together all of the things that you like and put them in a whole? But I will hand on heart admit that it's not just that he's lost a few followers along the way. The interesting thing for me with this musical journey is it verges on with some of the pro community. He's actually made them quite angry with what he's doing. So, you know, because he seemed to be heading down that path of really pure prog. Do you know, and when you saw, I went to see him on the Raven tour, and the whole evening was an experience. As you went into the venue, there was already music playing. The lights were down. You took your seat, and then as it got closer to showtime, the sounds that you were hearing became louder, and you realised that you'd walked into the show. The show had started as you were entering the venue, and then the band came on. It was seamless. It just raised into, and now we're on stage.
Which is exactly like you experienced with a King Crimson concert for the last bunch of years, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically like, okay, I'm a prog artist right now, and everybody's loving it. And now he's basically, okay, done with that. If you've been following, then this is what I got now. You don't like it?
Yeah. Absolutely. But as you said, there's been elements of this all along. I hear things like 12 Things I Left Behind off this album, and it took me to arguably the most accessible Porcupine Tree moment, which is Lazarus.
Yeah.
It took me straight there. It's got that kind of very open acoustic guitar strumming that I think he does magnificently. And those falsetto vocals, he's one of those singers who, if you really just listen to his vocals, he's not a great singer, but he puts his voice in such situations that I can't imagine anybody else singing these songs.
Yeah.
And that's when I really start to like a vocalist. Some guys like Jeff Tate, Ronnie James Dio, you love these guys because they're just the best singers that you've heard in these genres, do you know? But then you hear someone like Steven Wilson and you think, well, he's not going to be the best prog vocalist I've ever heard, but wow, that works. And it just kind of hits all the right marks for me. And coming from, I suppose, maybe, I mean, when I was growing up, I was a heavy metal melodic rock kind of guy. Prog came a little later for me. And it's got those hooks, I suppose, that kind of pull me in as well. So it's maybe just different starting places and different points in the journey. But to me, I'm not going to tell you this is my favourite Steven Wilson album. I gave it 5 out of 5. I don't do that very often. Is it my favourite? Yeah, it might be. It's not yet. It could be. It might not be. I don't know. But I do think it's a heck of an achievement, I have to say. And it makes me excited for where he's going to go, whereas I think it makes other people worried for where he's going to go. But who knows where he'll go now? So
We don't know. We don't know. Well, I mean, I think everybody should take the time to figure out if this album works for them or not. I mean, he's got enough fans out there that I'm assuming by now most of them have heard this. If you're on the fence about it based on what you've heard and based on how what you've heard doesn't sound to your liking, give it a try first. You may like it, you may not like it. I think the interesting question kind of in closing here is that, there was a point in time many years ago where a lot of us were saying that Porcupine Tree were going to be, you mentioned it earlier, were going to be the next big thing, right? They were supposed to be the successor to Radiohead to another level. They were on Lava Records, which was the place to be. And it never quite happened for whatever reason, right? It's almost like the record label didn't quite know what to do with them. They were gaining in popularity, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. So in a perfect world, an album like this, maybe in another time, maybe not Corona time or whatever, an album like this has some serious potential. So I guess the question is, will it achieve those lofty heights that maybe he never did with Porcupine Tree or earlier in his solo career? I don't know.
what I would say to that is it's interesting because I'm a fan, as you can tell, all the stuff that's round about me here. I have followed that journey because Porcupine Tree, when I first saw them, it was in the Garage in Glasgow. So that's a great club venue. It's bigger than a club, but it's a club venue. And from there, every time I saw Porcupine Tree, it just took a little step up. But the solo career has taken those little steps and taken a little step up, and then quite a big step up. I saw him at the Armadillo, or as we call it, the Clyde Auditorium here, which really is, that's a kind of Mark Knopfler kind of sort of size of venue. So we're talking a guy with like heritage and a real core following sell it out. And the tour and the only tickets that I bought during these strange times were really I'm buying tickets for fresh air, because when will I actually go and see a show? September? I don't think so, but we can only hope. And it's moved into the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow. So we're now into places where like we're almost, there's nowhere else to go in Glasgow other than moving into an Ormadomes. So he has taken those, depending on how tickets sell, of course, but he has taken those steps as a solo artist that I'm not convinced that Porcupine Tree would have. But then he pulled the plug on it, so who knows? Maybe they'd have done exactly the same thing. It's impossible to say, because I think a lot of the core followers are still from there. I am, certainly. But then he has shed a few of that. And I think he's now beginning to pick up people outside of that. The coverage that the album's got, and certainly more mainstream press, or certainly less progressive oriented press, has surprised me. Do you know that there's newspapers in the UK that are reviewing the album and various things like that? And it's funny when you're maybe overly involved in what an artist is doing, you don't quite notice that that's gaining traction elsewhere. And he does seem to be gaining traction elsewhere. He is still an average Joe, because he looks like an average Joe. He sells himself as an average Joe. I think he's beginning. I mean, he's got Elton John in this album. Elton John is the guy, that's the voice you're hearing. on Personal Shopper, and there's no irony in what Elton John is doing here. He admits that this guy who is talking about satisfying himself through commercialism and consumerism, and Steven Wilson is not saying you shouldn't do it. He's actually telling you this is what he does. This is who he is. He's the guy that's buying these things, do you know? But to have Elton John on your record, and Elton John
A big
was
deal,
happy
right?
to be on it. And then in the interview, to be fair, that's in the magazine I have there, he actually said to Elton John, well, obviously I'll send you a copy. He said, no, don't bother, I've pre-ordered it. So, do you know, it just shows you that he is beginning to get notice elsewhere. So who knows, maybe he's hit the nail on the head, but we'll find out.
Well, you know what it is too? I think in today's musical climate, if you are an eclectic, different solo artist who's making music that is accessible to the masses, as opposed to a band that's kind of in a certain genre or category, you are probably more likely to get noticed, because I think people nowadays, young people and old, like those personalities. They love those characters. They're a little bit different. He kind of fits a lot of those. It checks off a lot of those boxes. I never got the impression that he's the kind of guy that likes to be in the spotlight, that necessarily wants to be like an Elton John or wants to be like a Justin Timberlake or whoever, right? Is he that guy? Because I mean, when I talked to him 20 years ago, he was a real quiet, shy guy, very intelligent guy, but kind of knew his place and was like, I don't worry about all this kind of stuff too much. So I agree with you. I think that he is getting noticed more for doing something like this, which is much more mainstream, accessible than anything he's done before. But is he that guy? Does he have that want or that need or desire to kind of be that rock star or pop star, as we should say, of the modern era?
I think that he doesn't have, I mean, Elton John arguably has built certainly probably the latter half of his career on charisma as opposed to the music. Sorry for any massive Elton John fans out there, the early stuff is quite phenomenal. But this is his charisma. I think he's hit how to market. And that sounds really, really corporate. And I don't mean it that way because I love the music. I'm not just buying into an idea here. But I think that he's gained notice because this is an interesting campaign. He's doing something that nobody else is really doing. And it's making people sit up and kind of go, oh, wow, music can still be more than just a download or what I'm streaming for 2 minutes and moving on. He's actually trying to create a whole campaign. And that was the reason the album should have come out last year. And he held it back because of everything that was going on, because there was meant to be the whole campaign. And it was meant to lead into the live shows, which have been scaled down in size. They were actually bigger, fewer and bigger. And I wasn't actually going to be able to go because we're way too far away for me and my circumstances. But he seems to have been able to build this kind of notice that people are taking of him, not through being a star, but through building something that kind of carries what he's doing along, almost despite of him, because he is quite a shy, retiring, ordinary looking guy, which I find quite endearing personally. But yeah, he doesn't have that star quality. So, well, let's make people notice what I'm doing for other reasons. It's an interesting way of doing it. I like it, do you know? And as you say, there's a bit of quirk there too.
I mean, saying all this, who knows? Maybe he gets nominated for a Grammy Award and he wins, and all of a sudden he gives this unforgettable little shy, quirky speech at the Grammy Award ceremony. And then everybody's like, "Oh, Steven Wilson, this guy is awesome!" And he sells 1 million copies, and boom, there you go. Who knows, right? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Absolutely.
So there you have it, everybody. Some discussion about the Future Bites, a brand new solo album from Steven Wilson. Give it a try. You may like it, you may hate it. I think I've seen a lot of both. So it's definitely something different from him. I will say that. So, but give it a try. Check it out. Please go to our website, www.seatranquility.org, and read Steven's full interview where he goes through every single song. And I think gets a little bit more in depth than we did here, although we talked a lot about the artist himself to kind of prepare you for that. So check it out. We'll be seeing Steven next week, where he and I have a pretty special show planned for you guys. I did that show a couple weeks ago on an Italian prog rock primer. Okay, well, we're going to take that concept to the UK. And Steven and I, as of right now, we're looking to each give you our 20 favorite, most essential UK prog rock albums for those who, I mean, I don't know if there are any out there, but for those of you who maybe aren't that knowledgeable or haven't taken that deep dive into UK prog rock, we're each going to give you our favorite 20 or 25. We'll see how it goes. We still have a week to go. Of the must, the albums you must hear. The albums you must hear. There could be 70s albums, 80s albums, 90s albums, 2000 albums, whatever. And we're going to each give you 20. So we're going to do that next week. So stay tuned for that. That should be a fun one. And as Steven and I talked a bit before we went on the air here, we've announced a new program called In the Prog Seat, which will be airing our first episode next week, all about concept albums. Steven will be joining that show every so often too. So I'm going to hopefully get him on the second episode. That'll be coming up in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that. And all sorts of other stuff happening on the channel. I got coming up hopefully tomorrow or Friday, a review of this bad boy, the brand new Accept album, brand new CD Accept, which is called Too Mean to Die. I just got it in today, so I might do an unboxing video and then do a full review of the Black Sabbath Volume 4 Super Deluxe. I am dying to open this up. Steven's probably looking at this like, ooh, what am I
I've heard it. I haven't actually held it. I've heard the content.
Okay, I'm looking for, it's all about the booklet and the live album, the live disc. Because I mean, how many times have I bought Volume 4 in my life? It's my favorite Black Sabbath album, for crying out loud. It's just like I was not going to get this, and then Anthony Ferrara, if you're watching, he sends me a instant message on Facebook. Goes, oh, did you get Volume 4 yet? And I'm like, how many times am I going to buy this? He goes, oh, the live album's really cool. Look at the set list, and I'm like, oh man, I got to get this. So here we go.
See, you say I'm bad. You say I'm bad.
Yeah, I know. I take full credit. I'm bad. I think you're worse than me, but I'm pretty bad too.
Yeah, probably.
So there you have it, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube.
All the damn time.
All the damn time. For Steven Reid, I am Pete Pardo. See you all later on for another really cool show with some folks from Hitman, Armored Saint, and Metal Church coming up tonight. Check out that later. It's all a discussion about the 80s live music scene in various parts of the country here in the U.S. So stay tuned for that. And much more stuff coming up over the next couple days. And we'll see Steven next week. So take care, everybody. Thanks again.